It was one of those gray, rainy afternoons where the world feels stuck in a half-dream. I was wandering through the flea market on the edge of town, the one where sellers set up under leaky tarps, shouting over the sound of rain smacking against tin roofs. I had no real reason to be there. I just didn't want to go home yet. My apartment felt too quiet lately, as if it was holding its breath for something I couldn't name. I drifted past stalls of rusted tools, moth-eaten coats, and chipped china plates until I saw it. On a low table, surrounded by piles of junk, sat a flower pot. It wasn't much to look at, terracotta, cracked in two places, the glaze faded to a muddy brown. A pattern of vines wound around its surface, but they weren't painted. They were carved into the clay itself, delicate and twisting, with tiny flowers etched so finely that rainwater pooled in them like silver beads. I don't know why it caught my attention. Maybe it was the way it seemed older than everything else on that table, not just old, but ancient. How much for the pot? I asked the man behind the table. He looked at me strangely, like he was deciding whether to answer. $5, he said at last. I handed him a crumpled bill, tucked the pot under my arm, and walked away. At home, I set it on the kitchen counter. It looked oddly out of place among the bright ceramic mugs and steel appliances. I told myself I'd plant something in it later, maybe a basil plant. That night, as I was washing dishes, I noticed something odd. The pot was dry when I brought it home, but now, the carved vines along its surface were damp, as though they'd been watered from within. I touched it. The clay was warm. A faint scent drifted up from it, not the smell of damp earth, but something floral and sharp, like jasmine blooming under moonlight. It made me dizzy. I set it aside, telling myself it was just leftover moisture from the rain. But that night, I dreamed of a garden. It wasn't like any garden I'd ever seen. The plants glowed faintly, their leaves shimmering in colors I didn't have words for. Flowers the size of my head breathed open and shut like they were alive. Trees arched overhead, their branches heavy with silver fruit. The air was warm, fragrant, and buzzing with something electric. And there, at the center of it all, was a pedestal. On the pedestal sat a flower pot. My flower pot. When I woke, my sheets smelled faintly of the same sharp, sweet scent. The next morning, I decided to plant something in it. I dug through my kitchen drawers for an old packet of marigold seeds I'd never used. I filled the pot with soil, pressed the seeds into the earth, and left it on the windowsill. By evening, the first sprout appeared. That should have been impossible. Marigolds take days, sometimes weeks to germinate. But when I leaned closer, I saw the sprout was unlike any I'd seen. Its stem was a deep violet, and its leaves shimmered faintly, like sunlight on water. Over the next week, the plant grew at a staggering pace. It curled toward me when I walked into the room. At night, it seemed to pulse faintly, as though breathing. And the dreams continued. Every night, I returned to the glowing garden. Every night, the plants seemed closer, as if they were drawing me in. One night, I dreamt I touched one of the silver fruits. It was warm, soft under my fingertips, and when I plucked it, the garden seemed to sigh. I bit into it, and the world tilted. I woke gasping, my heart pounding. My hands were sticky. When I turned on the light, I saw it, silver juice smeared across my palms. I didn't tell anyone. By the end of the second week, my violet-stemmed plant was nearly 3 feet tall. Its flowers bloomed in colors that didn't exist in the waking world, shifting from blue to gold to a kind of luminous green that made my eyes ache. And then, one evening, someone knocked on my door. A woman stood in the hallway. She was tall, thin, and dressed entirely in black, her hair the color of ink. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You found it," she said. I stared at her. "Found what?" "The vessel." Her gaze flicked to the windowsill, to the pot. "It belongs to us." I laughed, but my mouth was dry. "It's just a flower pot." I bought it at a flea market. Her eyes sharpened. And has it spoken to you yet? I shut the door in her face. That night, I didn't dream of the garden. Instead, I dreamed of her, the woman in black, walking between the glowing plants, her hands brushing against their leaves. Everywhere she touched, the plants withered. She looked over her shoulder at me and smiled. When I woke, the flowers in my living room were drooping. The pot felt cold. I tried to ignore it. But the woman kept returning. Sometimes I'd see her across the street, watching my apartment. Sometimes she'd leave small envelopes under my door, blank inside, but smelling faintly of that sharp, sweet scent. The dreams grew darker. The garden was wilting. The pedestal where the pot had stood was now cracked. And each time I woke, my violet-stemmed plant looked weaker. Finally, I decided to get rid of it. I took the pot, plant and all, to the park late one night. I dug a shallow hole under a tree and buried it. I didn't dream that night. The next morning, the pot was back on my windowsill. The plant was taller than ever, its flowers wide open, the petals trembling like they were breathing fast. And beside it, on the counter, sat a silver fruit. I didn't want to touch it. But I also couldn't look away. My fingers brushed it, and a voice, not aloud, but inside my head, whispered. Eat, and it will be yours forever. I should have thrown it out the window. Instead, I bit into it. Light exploded behind my eyes. I wasn't in my apartment anymore. I was in the garden, but this time, I was awake. The plants leaned toward me, wrapping their leaves around my arms. The air was thick, alive, humming with something ancient. At the center, the pedestal stood waiting, empty. In my hands, I held the pot. When I set it down, the ground shuddered. Vines burst from the soil, wrapping around my legs. The scent of jasmine filled my lungs until I couldn't breathe. And then I saw her, the woman in black, standing at the edge of the garden. You've chosen, she said. The vines tightened. I don't know how long it's been since that day. The garden doesn't have days or nights. It just is. The plants whisper to me in languages I don't understand. Sometimes they give me fruit, and when I eat, I see glimpses of the other world, my apartment, the rainy flea market, the street outside. But I can't go back. The pot still sits on my old windowsill, but now it's empty. Maybe someone else will find it. And when they do, their life will turn upside down, just like mine.